Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming.
Good morning, and you're very welcome to another Signpost Series webinar. My name is Cathal Somers, and I hope you're all keeping well and looking forward to another very interesting presentation. In this special Teagasc Heritage Council Hedgerow Week edition, we've got a fantastic lineup ahead, featuring expert speakers and insightful videos, discussions that delve into everything from biodiversity and hedge types to management setup, safety protocols, and real world perspectives of contractors. We're delighted to be joined this morning by Dr. Keena, Teagasc Countryside Management Specialist, Kieran Roach from FPD Insurance, Liam O'Connor of Clare County Council, and Francis Quigley, Teagasc Machinery Specialist. Good morning all, how are you keeping?
Morning, Cathal.
Good morning, Cathal.
Catherine, we might start with you maybe just to have a quick, before we kick off there. We're in the middle of Hedgerow Week again, how's it going for you?
Yeah, all good. A few more events over the weekend, and Yvonne's going to put the link in the chat to Hedgerow Week to remind people later on. And we had a fantastic event yesterday. Francis led a fantastic event in Kildalton on hedge cutting. And that's where the videos have come from for today.
Excellent, with some super videos lined up, a really good quality. And Francis, so you've been very busy this week, obviously, as well. So how did it go yesterday?
Yeah, no, it was fantastic, and we got great support, Joe, from particularly the trade and the industry, Joe, and to get the actual machines on site, Joe. It takes a lot of effort from them to get machines down and in, so it was really good, and it gave us the opportunity then, I suppose, to put together a lot of what we have today, so to actually see it in practice.
Yeah, and we see a lot of machines on the road already this month, so yeah, it's all systems go. Kieran, you're very welcome as well. You're coming in from the FPD side. You're going to talk a little about health and safety to us.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to talk about health and safety. Too many farm fatalities and serious injuries, so I suppose we can't communicate the message enough. And we're speaking to the right people here, and I think it's important we speak to contractors at this time of the year with all the hedge cutting that's going on.
Excellent. And Liam, you're very welcome as well. What are you going to talk to us about today?
Community hedge cutting scheme that Clare County Council had. So effectively, we give financial assistance to landowners to maintain their hedgerows. It's a scheme that's going since 2013 and basically helps them meet their obligations under the Roads Act to keep the hedgerows in check and not cause a problem to the public road users.
Yeah, super. So supporting farmers and landowners. Just to kick off, Yvonne is there in the background, and Yvonne is going to load up a video first. So let's begin with our first speaker, who will be Teagasc Countryside Management Specialist, Dr. Keena, who will talk about hedgerow management.
So, Catherine, how important are hedges in our landscape?
Very important, Francis, for a number of reasons. Firstly, they sequester and store a lot of carbon. They regulate water flow, which helps to reduce flooding. And they also filter water, helping our water quality. And they're the most important habitat on farms for biodiversity because they're the most common. Half our birds, 55 of our bird species, use hedges, 35 of them to actually nest in the hedge. All our 9 bats use hedges to move through the countryside and feed and roost. They're also good for our moths and bees and butterflies. Small mammals use underneath the hedges, the hedgehog, the shrew. There are corridors throughout the countryside, throughout the farm for movement of these. So a huge amount of biodiversity in the hedge, provided they're managed sustainably and are healthy hedges. And the only time to assess the health of a hedge is in the winter, when they're dormant and when the leaves aren't there and you can see the structure. In summer, their structure is hidden by vegetation, both the leaves and the ground vegetation. We want flowers and fruit on our hedges. We want healthy hedges, and for hedges that are regularly cut, we cannot depend on the body of the hedge for the flowers and the fruit. So we need a whole farm strategy.
As you drive around, you see hedges in many different shapes and sizes. What's the best way to manage them?
For management purposes, they fall into 2 categories, topped hedges and tree-line hedges, and we want both. A few key principles are that the whitethorn, which is the main plant in our hedges, wants to grow into being a single-stemmed tree with a full canopy full of fruit and flowers. So topped hedges are a man-made habitat and need to be managed. Tree-line hedges are effectively a narrow linear woodland where the whitethorns have escaped into trees. The biodiversity value of tree-line hedges is primarily in the canopy, full of flowers and fruit. And while they can be rejuvenated by carefully hedge laying, they are at high risk of being cut incorrectly and turned into stumpy upside-down tulip bush hedges a metre or so above ground, and where repeated cutting results in death by 1,000 cuts because the stump cannot support the hedge. We need to value these tree-line hedges, and the aim is to have at least 50% of hedges on every farm as tree-line hedges. And there are lots on farms, particularly on the mairlings or the external boundaries. Tree-line hedges do not need to be cut, so never top them. Side trim overhanging branches if they're causing interference on the farm. Scrub encroachment can be addressed by grazing or cutting the adjoining vegetation. The biodiversity value of topped hedges is primarily in the base, where the small mammals can hide, where birds can nest. But we can still have some of the canopy of the tree line by leaving an occasional clump of whitethorn grow up from within the hedge, and that then becomes a tree producing buckets of flowers and fruit. To manage these topped hedges, allow them grow as tall and as wide as possible, the bulkier the better. But the apical dominance, where the hedge wants to turn into a tree-line hedge, must be prevented by topping. So as high as possible, but as long as the hedge cutter can reach, and in a triangular profile to allow the light down at the base of the hedge. Light incremental cutting results in dense growth and healthy hedges. Avoid rough cuts which allow disease in, and allow a clump of whitethorn saplings from within the hedge grow up to provide the flowers and fruit.
So finally, Catherine, what's your message to farmers and contractors?
Think before cutting hedges. Together we could transform the countryside starting this autumn in a short few years by leaving one clump of whitethorn saplings grow up from within the hedge to flower and fruit. Retain or allow half the hedges on your farm escape into tree-line hedges.
Some great advice there, Catherine. Thanks a million, Catherine Francis. It's an excellent video. Catherine, am I imagining things this year, or is there a lot of berries on the trees this year?
Yes, some species. I know there's one I've noticed, the spindle, on my own farm, and it's very little of it. So everything is different. But I think you're right, the whitethorn and the haws, which is the main one, and the sloes, plenty of them.
Yeah, and some great advice there for us. And we have a good few videos today, so we'll keep moving. And we have another video, so the second video, Vaughn's going to get us set up first there now. And it's to see hedgerow management in practice. And we're going to listen to Catherine again as she speaks with John Walsh, who is the winner of the 2024 Teagasc FPD Environmental Sustainability Award. And we're going to hear from a farmer's perspective, which is great.
John, your farm was the overall winner of the Teagasc FBD Farm Sustainability Awards in 2024, and one of the reasons was the quantity and quality of hedges. Tell us about your farm.
First of all, it's a family farm. We're farming in South Tipperary, near the village of Bellaluby, mainly dairying, small beef enterprise at the same time.
John, you love hedges. Why do you like them?
I suppose it was instilled in me in nearly 3 generations now. You can see older hedgerows, mainly trees that were there planted in my grandfather's time, so it's instilled in us, and I can see it going on to the next generation in my son. So it's there, there's a love for it.
What type of hedges do you like, John?
I like topped hedges, just a light run every year, and you get a better hedge altogether.
So John, how do you manage your topped hedges?
First of all, I trim them annually, and it's a light trim, keeping the base out, and we'll say leaving them grow up to 7-8 feet tall, but they're all topped, and every 30 metres or so leaving a whitethorn or maybe blackthorn sapling, and some of them are there 6-7 years having flowers in the springtime, and at the present now there's plenty of fruit on them.
Would you consider leaving them longer than a year?
I'm not a firm believer on this maybe 3-year rotation, because I think it's trying to get a shape in them, especially trying to get the base wide, it's too difficult, and you're hitting back into woody hedgerows later on and you're doing more damage. A light run is the main secret on our farm.
And who cuts the hedges?
I do them myself, and my guide when I'm on the tractor when they have the hedge trimmed or topped, I still can't see out over the hedge. So you're keeping your height, like, it's just a rule of thumb for myself.
So John, what message do you have for other farmers and contractors?
Take it easier on the hedge, and first of all, trying to improve hedges, improve what you have first. Like, you see a lot of new hedgerows being planted for grant aid and left there, kind of like, so trying to improve what you have, like, and maybe that's easier. The message has to get across, go lighter on your hedges and just try and bring them up more than anything else, like, and this nice trimmed short back and sides is not on anymore. Like, it makes me cringe, to be honest with you. When hedges are done properly, they are actually stock proof. On our farm, there's not too many, we'll say, electric fences by the hedges, because the cows, cattle, they need the fibre, and they actually, when the hedge is thick enough, they will actually trim the bottom. If you know, on our farm now at the moment, the base of the hedge is nearly thick, and now it's just the top is hanging over because it hasn't been grazed during the summer. It could be great if it could inspire farmers and contractors to leave shoots here and there. Even if you only did it on one single hedge, and maybe the following year have them marked so that the contractor can see them, like, and the discussion has to be there. I think the discussion isn't there, it's kind of left to the contractor, like, but it's slow progress. It takes a number of years to get it right.
Another excellent video. Thanks a million, Catherine and John. Great to see actually a farmer talking with Catherine. Probably a lot of what you've been preaching for many, many years that you can hear John talking about. And you can obviously see from he's not just regurgitating what he's hearing, he's actually putting in practice. And you can see from the hedges, they're unbelievable. And what I really liked about him was he wasn't talking about planting new hedgerows. He was talking about doing the best with what he had before he'd even go down that route.
And the same man actually planted 2 hedges, split a 27-acre field, he told us yesterday. So he's into his new hedges too. But I totally agree. That's why we didn't include it, because the message is mind your own. No, super person that really understands and loves hedges. Now, about, I think, 80% of our hedges are cut by hedge cutting contractors. So, he's one that cuts his own. And I suppose that's an added advantage in understanding the hedge.
Yeah, look, the message is there. Just have the chat to the contractor before they come in. It's a 2-second chat, because I know the contractor comes in and sometimes we don't have time to talk to them. But I know from my own experience of not hitting a contractor in time, I swept out a load of my white thorns I just planted by accident. So I wasn't happy. I had spent 2 hours to put them in. But anyway, that happens. So it's just making sure you have that chat. So that's important. So next, we're going to have our presentations from Kieran Roach from FBD Insurance. So Kieran, if you'd like to start sharing. And Kieran's going to talk about some of the important advice on staying safe when hedge cutting. And look, we all farm, and the number one thing we have to do is make sure we're safe and healthy and well. If we're not, we can't farm. So it's a really important topic. Okay, Kieran.
This is something that I'm really passionate about. I'm the risk manager with FBD and also part of the Farm Safety Partnership. And I suppose safety is a really important part of sustainability. But when we look at the fatalities that have occurred in the sector over the last number of years, they're very high. Sadly, we've had 14 fatalities already this year, and in all workplaces there's 28. So that sort of puts it a little bit into perspective where agriculture is at. And behind each one of those, there's a family, there's a community, and there's devastation. If we look at where the fatal accidents are happening, 40% are vehicles, another 6% machinery. So that's nearly half of them are vehicles and machinery. Then we have livestock, falls from heights and heavy loads. And if we look at the demographic that have been affected the most, you can see that 91 of the 171 farmers or people who were killed on Irish farms between 2015 and 24 were over the age of 65. And if we look at the 14 fatalities for this year, most of those were over the age of 65 as well. So that's an area, a group of people that we really need to target. When we look at tractors, machinery, most of the fatalities, serious injuries relate to crushes or being struck by the vehicle or the machine. I sort of break it into 4 different categories. So we have the operator and the driver. So we look at human error, inexperience, rushing, speed, fatigue. Farmers and contractors are working very long hours, lack of concentration, distraction. We see a lot of people on the mobile not paying full attention to the job that they're at, creating additional risk. The environment that they're working in, so working on steep gradients, the weather condition, poor driver vision, working in the same areas with other people, or when we look at hedge cutting contracting, they'll be working on the road and there'll be members of the public there, or maybe close to houses, etc. Then the tractor and the machine itself, unguarded parts, it's really essential that every machine part is guarded properly and the equipment is in good working condition. And the last thing would be systems of work, so failure to follow safe systems of work. It's really important you have a safe system of work and it's followed at all times. Just in relation to some of the key legislation that we have, there's the Health and Safety and Welfare at Work Act. And within that, the employer has duties, as do the employee. The Health and Safety Authority, I suppose, manages the enforcement of it and support in relation to guidance for farmers. But when we look at the employees or self-employed persons, or the employer and self-employed persons' obligations, one is to have a safety statement and to carry out a risk assessment, to have a safe place of work, safe working procedures, ensure that all plant and machinery are maintained in good condition, provide appropriate PPE and have that safe system of work. And in relation to employees, to work safely themselves, cooperate with their employer, and if they see a risk, note it. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see Be Smart. So there's a tool developed by the Health and Safety Authority called Be Smart. It's developed to carry out safety statements and risk assessments. And there's one specifically for contractors and actually hedge cutting contractors. So if you don't have a safety statement done, I'd encourage you to go into Be Smart. Other pieces of legislation that are really important would be the General Applications Regulations 2007. And they would look at, the maintenance of machinery and training and PPE. The Road Act, so the responsibility in relation to if you put muck or debris on the road or anything that may cause an additional risk, you have a responsibility, to clean that up and make sure that risk is eliminated. And Road Traffic Act, so if you're driving any vehicle on the road, that the vehicle is roadworthy in condition, and also that the operator, has the appropriate licenses for driving that particular machine. And to look at the types of risks that we see typically with hedge cutting, so obviously there's the road traffic issues with members of the public, cars and traffic moving on the road, someone potentially being hit by a tractor, the cutting head or the arm of the machine itself, flying debris can easily fly 50 meters, so it's important that people are aware of that, and the operator, and they're aware of people who are around that particular area. Moving parts, PTO shaft and other moving parts, they're guarded as appropriate. Obviously, not all moving parts can be guarded. If there's overhead power lines, be aware of them. And remember that, electricity can jump. When you're hitching or unhitching any implement to the tractor itself, how the tractor is balanced. So it's really important that the tractor is balanced properly and it can take the weight of detachment that's attached to it. Hydraulic hoses and oil leaks, so you have appropriate measures in place, one, to prevent that leak from occurring in first instance, and what to do in the event of a leak. So the key controls I would have, and this would go for any risk, whether you're hedge cutting, whether you're farming, any type of business, is to carry out a risk assessment. Identify what is the hazard here, what's the risk, and how am I going to manage it. So to give a simple example of that, PTO is a hazard. The risk is serious injury, amputation, potentially death, and the control measures to have the PTO shaft covered, U-guard on the machine and O-guard on the tractor. Ensure that the machine that you have, that they're all maintained in good condition and that they're CE compliant. CE compliance is really important because that means that they've gone through a variety of risk assessments to ensure that they're safe for operation. Put a safe operation procedure in place so you know how to carry out your work safely, especially for more difficult tasks. And it's imperative that the operator of any vehicle is competent, and competent really means that they've got training, the skills and knowledge to operate that vehicle safely, and appropriate PPE. And what's really important in relation to hedge cutting, especially when you're around the roads and you might have someone helping you, is persons wearing appropriate high vis. So if we're just looking at some of the elements around the site in relation to risk, so the first thing is saying in relation to hedge cutting, carry out a risk assessment of the site. What's the visibility going to be like, especially when you're on the road, and what type of road traffic measures do you need to put in place and signage to ensure that you're safe and members of the public are going to be safe. If you need a flagman, get a flagman, make sure that they wear high vis, have appropriate signage in place to warn people of the activity that's going on and the risk of flying debris, and be extra careful around overhead power lines. And again, as I said, remember, electricity can jump. And before you start any work, have a look in the hedgerow. Check, is there wires, is there bottles, is there glass, is there anything there that could potentially get caught up on your machine and damage it, or actually fly and hit someone who might be close to where the activity is being carried out. Additionally, with the machine, I suppose it's really important you have protective measures for the driver. So make sure there's a mesh or polycarbonate guard around the cab itself, and especially around the glass. The hedge cutter, ensure that it's correctly mounted, maintained in good condition, according to manufacturer's recommendations. So it's important to read that manufacturer's book that comes with you. It gives guidance on the operation of that hedge cutter. And ensure that the hedge cutter itself then is securely attached, it's checked regularly, and if there's any missing or damaged parts, that they're replaced on a regular basis. The hydraulic pipes at the back of the tractor, make sure that they're kept in a tidy manner and routed safely, so they're not going to get damaged in operation. And the tractor itself, again, that it's the appropriate weight, to manage the machine that it's operating. And if you need ballast, add ballast to it. And in conclusion, I suppose there's a lot in that, and it's a high-level sort of piece I'm looking at here in relation to risk assessment. But as I said at the start, there's too many people seriously injured and killed in Irish farms. And I suppose we have to take measures to ensure it doesn't happen, and everyone has an obligation. And these are the key safety controls I'd give to anyone. One is to ensure that you carry out a risk assessment. Any plant and machinery that you're using, that they're safe, they're maintained, they have the appropriate CE marking, you have safe operational procedures in place, and lastly, that all operators that are competent. And competent means that they've got the training, the skills, and the knowledge and experience to carry out that work in a safe manner. So that's my advice on safety, and I wish everyone a safe year. And I think it's really important, we talk to each other, and if you see someone else who's carrying out an activity that could be done safer, we might make them aware of it, potentially just a safer way to do it, because working together is the only way that we're going to make a real difference in relation to reducing the serious injuries and fatalities that we see within the agricultural sector. Thanks, Cathal.
That's super. Thanks a million, Kieran. Just one thing occurred to me when you were talking there. We always talk about the deaths, I suppose, that occur, but sometimes those injuries are even the more serious injuries that we don't see the stats so often, and they're the ones that happen the most often, Kieran, are they?
Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot more farm injuries from accidents than what there is fatalities. And if we actually look at the farm injuries, probably livestock would be the number one cause of farm injuries. But when we do have farm injuries related to tractors and machinery, generally they're very, very severe and they're life-changing. We see amputations. We've seen people who've been left paraplegic. So they're very, very significant injuries. And you don't read about those in the paper, as you said. We hear about them anecdotally from friends, and I suppose there's so many people in the farming community that have been affected. That's how we hear these stories, and they're life-changing injuries.
Yeah, I think there's not a farmer in the country or landowner that doesn't have some story or relation to them that's had an issue, but we might chat more about that towards the end. Thanks a million, Kieran. Next, we're going to have another. You're very welcome. We're going to have another video, and now to machinery. And this in the next video, Francis Quigley is going to speak with Craig Whiting from Bomford Turner about hedge cutting setup and operation.
So Craig, thanks a million for joining us here today. I suppose one of the first questions that maybe we get asked is how does a farmer pick the right machine for his setup?
It's a question that we get asked a lot, really. From a Bomford Turner perspective, we've got a large range of machines, from small to big. A lot of it is down to the environment it's going to be working in, the tractor that's going to be fitted to, and what sort of job you want to do with it, really. We do a lot of farmer-style machines, contractor-style machines, but there also is, a sector for the smaller machines, for the small area, small estates with the smaller tractors. Predominantly, it's down to the size of the tractor, what type of application or job it's looking to do. And that encompasses a lot of the safety aspects of the machine. These are linkage mounted, predominantly machines, so we need to make sure that it's safe, and the operator is clean, is careful with the machine, and it will do what he wants it to do, really. So, but again, there's so many different options and applications that we can do nowadays with this type of machine. There's a varying amount, and there's a lot of thought goes into that type of decision, basically, from the operator. So we try our best at shows and demo days and all that type of thing to give the advice. It's good that you can see the machines, from a visual and get around and see it. So, the opportunities for customers to come to the factory, to visit us at shows and exhibitions is vital to allow them to make the right decision, basically. So there's a lot of thought and a lot of options that need to be taken into consideration.
So basically the advice would be to go and talk to the dealer and maybe their specialist to try and get advice around their particular setup?
Yeah, a lot of people would do some research on the internet. The websites now give everybody a lot of information, but it is down to speaking to the customers through the dealerships and also, to the end manufacturer as well.
So you have experts available that could help out in that decision-making process? Yeah,
we do, and we're always happy to help and speak to anybody when needs be, really. But the way we set up our networks, we have professionals doing that type of job for us that have the knowledge and also know the farmer and the local community, which does help a lot as well.
So Craig, in order for a farmer or a contractor in particular, that are doing a lot of work with these machines, what advice would you give them to get the best and the longest life out of their machine?
It's a big investment for these guys, so the machine needs to last them a good amount of time, whether that be a farmer level machine or contractor, council, local authority. They need to get the money out of that machine. Some guys will be using it to make a living, so the upkeep is paramount, and some farmers will use it for a few weeks a year. So there's lots of different applications for these type of machines, but the main thing is the maintenance. Is the daily, the weekly maintenance to keep these machines in tip-top condition. That comes from daily greasing, daily checks, check your oil levels, change filters, keep everything sharp, tidy. Make sure if you ever get any kind of vibration or any kind of noise that you hear, check it out really quick. Don't leave it, because normally it then expands into something else. So it's down to making sure you know your machine, you understand all the areas that need to be maintained, and the machine will then look after you.
Thank you, Francis and Craig. That was a really excellent video. Francis, just a quick one for you before we launch into the next presentation. You're talking in the video about buying machines, and it's always a big decision. Are more farmers buying their own kind of hedge cutters now, or are we still very dependent on the contractors?
Really, the reality is 90% of the work or more is probably, is contractors, and I suppose, it was very interesting listening to John talking about the height of his hedges. Even yesterday when he mentioned it, some of the contractors were a little bit surprised when he said that, my judges, when I'm finished that hedge, sit in the seat of the tractor, I can't see over the hedge, and that's what that farmer wants. It's probably what a lot more farmers would love to have, but maybe they don't, realize it. But that's where their communication, that we're going to get into in our last video as well, will come through, that it's having that chat, so it is really, it's mainly contractors, that are doing the work around the country.
Yeah, and they talked about maintenance there. I assume probably contractors are more into the maintenance because it's their machine, it's their livelihood. Whereas if you have one in the shed there you use every now and again, we probably don't have as much time to keep it maintained.
Yeah, now look, it is a very specialized piece of equipment. Even farmers that will buy, a hedge cutter, are obviously into their machinery, to a certain degree, so, and those guys tend to be quite good at the maintenance. Now, again, chatting to Craig yesterday, he said the most important tool in the toolbox is the grease gun, and it's just making sure that you're hitting every grease nipple, I suppose. So even if you do invest in a new machine, just take the time to go around the machine and make sure you've identified all the grease points on the machine, and that you don't get a surprise maybe a couple of months or maybe a year or two down the line, and you start hearing a noise, and then you spot a grease nipple that you've didn't realize was there.
That rattle that you don't want to hear. Yeah. That's super, Francis, and we'll talk to you more about that after. Next, we're going to have Liam. Liam, you might get your presentation there ready. And Liam's going to talk to us about the new hedge cutting program that has been launched locally. And just to let everyone know, this is our last presentation. We have one video after this, and then we'll get into questions and answers. So do get your questions into us.
Thank you. So my name is Liam O'Connor, and I work in the transportation section there of Clare County Council. So in 2013, we introduced the community hedge cutting scheme to, I suppose, assist farmers to meet their obligations under the Roads Act. So Section 70 of the Roads Act obliges farmers to take all reasonable care to ensure that trees, hedges, and other vegetation or could not cause a danger to people using the road. So in terms of take-up, last year we had 42 applications approved
from various community groups and landowners, and 24,000 was paid out. So that represents 480 kilometres of roads within Clare that were financially assisted to maintain their hedgerows in 2024. So the application form for the hedge cutting scheme is available on the Clare County Council website, or by contacting the roads office in Clare County Council. And the terms and conditions of the application is set out on the application form. So I'll just go through a few of them. They're not very onerous. So the scheme is open to local community groups and landowners for hedge cutting on public roads. The groups must nominate a contact person to deal with all correspondence arising from the application. And the minimal length of road to cover the application is 5 kilometres. However, if there is a significant road safety issue, we will accept applications that are less than 5 kilometres. The grants then are based on the actual length of road that requires attention, as opposed to just road length. So some parts of the road may not require attention. So the grants that will be provided are for the length of road network, as I said, that do require attention. And if both sides of the road require attention, then the grant calculation can be doubled. So ideally, the road network should be continuous, and the termination points ideally will be at junctions. Applications can be made up to the 30th of September, and then works need to be carried out by the end of February. Communities will arrange for the relevant works to be carried out. They will appoint the contractors, and they should ensure that the contractors have the appropriate insurance and are compliant with health and safety regulations. We would ask that 7 days notice then will be given to the relevant municipal district office within the council before work commences, just in case the municipal district have plans to carry out works on the road. And no funding then also will be provided if works are carried out in advance of the application being considered. So the amount of grant available is €50 per kilometre of roadside that require attention. The application should be accompanied by a map, so identifying the roads that are to be done. If there are a large influx of applications, obviously funding is limited, so if there's a large influx of applications, we would prioritise school bus routes or routes that carry public or special needs transportation. But what I can say is, in my 5 years in this role, we've never refused an application for want of funding, and I don't think that will happen. So grant applications then can only be considered for public roads, so those with a road number, so that's an L road or an R road. Residents along the proposed routes must, I suppose, agree to the works and should sign the application form conveying their approval for the works. I said all hedge cutting, so I suppose from my point of view, I suppose road safety is the key, but our biodiversity officer, I suppose, I can't make a say, but he will advise contractors and landowners regarding best practice in hedgerow management. So as per the Wildlife Acts, all hedge cutting must take place between September 1st and February 28th. The hedges should be cut in an A-shaped profile, leaving the peak as high as possible. Disturbance of invasive species such as Japanese knotweed should be avoided, and routine checks should be carried out by the contractor to ensure no structural damage is caused to hedgerows. And prior to the commencement of works, I suppose advice is available from the County Council biodiversity officer, who will advise landowners and contractors in relation to hedgerow management. I suppose one key part of our grant scheme is that overcutting of hedges must be avoided. Grants will not be paid out if overcutting takes place. So that's my brief, I suppose, presentation. The application form is available on the Clare County Council website, and the contact details for the Roads Department and Biodiversity Officer are there, and we will give whatever advice we can to both landowners and to contractors.
That's great. Thanks a million, Liam. The one thing I took from that is you have plenty of money there, so there's no problem there with applications. But I suppose a question for you is, where did the idea come from, or what issue arose that I suppose you went down this route?
I suppose historically, county councils used to, I suppose, cut hedges on most of the road network. I suppose when the recession kicked in kind of 2008, 2009, I suppose funding became tight, and I suppose the obligations of the Roads Act does place the responsibility on the landowners to maintain their hedgerows on public roads. So I suppose the decision was made at that point that the councillors wanted to assist the farmers and landowners, so they developed this scheme to, I suppose, encourage landowners to maintain their hedgerows.
Yeah, super. Thanks a million, and we'll chat to you thereafter in the Q&A. So finally, we're to our last video. So in the last video, Yvonne's going to sit up for us now, and it's Francis Quigley is going to join us again. He's going to talk about communication between contractors and farmers for best practice.
Francis, if we want every farmer and contractor to leave a new clump or bunch of whitethorn within every topped hedge, how do we get this to happen?
Well, I suppose, Catherine, from talking to contractors, and farmers all over the country, one of the challenges is the first thing we need to do is, when we're talking to farmers, it's not a tree, because they immediately jump to think that it's an ash or an oak or something like that. So, leaving a clump in the hedge involves just literally skipping a section of hedge. So literally as they're cutting along, it'll be a thorn. They don't have to look for a thorn because that's predominantly what's in the hedge. So they literally have to skip a clump in the hedge. The challenge with that, though, is that maybe the contractor himself feels going away or to the farm, oh, I left a clump, somebody's going to be criticising me over that. So it's communication between the farmer and the contractor. The farmer has to tell the contractor that he wants a clump or that he's happy with a clump in the hedge. The contractor should ask the farmer, if I went in to get a haircut in the morning and I sat down and the hairdresser doesn't just start cutting, the hairdresser will ask you what you want me to do. Just if we can get farmers and contractors just to communicate, not to rely, the farmer should totally rely on the contractor to decide what's to be done with the hedges, contractor not to rely totally on what he wants to decide to do with the hedges. So if he goes out then and he cuts that and there is a clump left, the farmer and the contractor know that everybody's happy with the job that's been done.
When we have that clump or bunch retained in year one, how do we manage that next year?
Really, that's one of the big challenges with this clump, because it's probably the first 3 years are key, and that's where the communication issue. If it's the same contractor comes back next year, look, there's a good chance that he might remember he left a clump last year, but if you don't say to him again, oh, remember we left those clumps last year, and ideally you can mark that clump, because when you actually travel along one of the hedge here, before we had cut this, it's very, very hard to pick out last year's clump. Now if you know, right, we've a marker there, or we know where that clump was left, or even leave a few extra ones, and you can cut it back to the one or two next year, the strong ones. But to leave that strong one next year, and again, even in year 3, you'll actually struggle maybe to find that clump. But once you go beyond that, we're going to end up maybe at year 4, year 5, we're going to have a clump that looks something like this, and then everybody's happy with that clump. There's no question anymore of why have we left this clump, and you can see the berries and everything on that. It really brings it home to everybody at that stage why we've actually made this decision to leave a dirty part in the hedge in year 1.
So finally, Francis, what's our message for farmers and contractors cutting hedges?
The real thing I want is communication. I just want the farmer and the contractor both to talk to each other. Now, whether that involves the contractor actually stopping, going in the gate and ask the farmer, look, what am I doing for you today? The farmer making sure that he's not just ringing up and let the contractor work away on the whole farm. Talk to each other, agree this is what we want done, and then that will happen.
That's super. Thanks a million, Francis and Catherine. An excellent video. Francis, I suppose we've talked about communication a bit, and it's been mentioned this morning a lot. I suppose the one question is, what is the main barrier to that communication, I suppose, at the moment? Why is it so hard? Why is it not happening as much as we'd like it to happen?
I don't really know. I suppose a lot of time might be one of the reasons, but a lot of the times I think maybe farmers maybe lack the confidence to tell the contractor. They've been so far removed from cutting hedges. There's no experience at all left on the farm of cutting hedges, because it's been a contractor's job for maybe 1, 2, maybe even 3 generations at this stage. And say, oh no, he knows that job inside out. And I don't want to tell him to change what he's doing. So, and it's funny. You go around, you'll see you could nearly pick out different contractors as you drive around in the way hedges are cut in different areas. It's really the contractor that's deciding, no, this is what deem as a good hedge. You'll go some places and they're real tight and low, and the next place then they might be, that bit bigger and higher, like, so. But again, in fairness to contractors, any of them I've ever spoken to, they'll do whatever the farmer wants. They're out there to supply the service that the farmer wants. And they've I suppose even in the they believe what they're doing. Oh, it's the sharp back and sides is what's wanted. What's called it. So again, change that. And to be honest, I think that's come. It was mentioned yesterday, by Bamford about their match blades, our competition blades, which are about this perfect shape, whereas in fairness, as Catherine would always say, the birds of the bees certainly don't care about the shape of it. Fine along outside the entrance, if you're coming out of the gate, and you want to be able to see in both directions, then a low tight hedge is from a visibility point of view very important. But once you've gone out that sight line, gone beyond that sight line, you don't have to continue it on for the rest of the distance. And it was good to hear Liam mention that they're trying to encourage landowners that are being paid for to leave the hedge grow up.
Yeah, super, Catherine. We have a mountain of questions coming in there. I suppose we better tear into them.
Yeah, and I think a huge interest in both the health and safety and the hedge cutting scheme so far, more so than the hedge management. So Francis, you can help me out here, but I suppose I'll just ask one. Lots of great tips about health and safety, all were important. Of that list, which would be the biggest threat to bear in mind?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Well, I suppose they're all important because you never know what thing is going to catch you. But I suppose what's very important in relation to anyone working on the road, it's a different environment. You don't have control over what other road users or members of the public might do. So it's really important, I suppose, number one, the person that's doing it is competent, that they understand the risk and how they know how to communicate with members of the public if they need to. There's a really good risk assessment, so you understand what the risks are. If there's bad bends, have I put up the appropriate signage? Do I have the appropriate traffic management in place? Are high vis worn by my employees who might be helping me with that traffic management? So I think that'd be one thing that's, I suppose, very unique to hedge cutting to other farming activities, is that road activity and how that's managed, because the interaction with members of the public, cars, and your operation, it's important that that's managed well.
Very good. What support is there to purchase safety equipment, in particular a quick hitch for the 3-point linkage? All diggers are fitted with these.
Yeah, there is an accelerated capital allowance for farm safety equipment, and within that's one of the elements that's listed within it. So I advise anyone to go in and have a look at that list. It's on the Department of Agriculture website, and you'll see where there's grants available for different types of machinery and equipment.
Francis,
I just like come in there. Just the quick hitch, the 3-point linkage quick hitch. In fairness with these hedge cutters, they're extremely heavy machines. There's an awful lot of weight out on one side, so there is specific mounting, and they need to be very carefully fitted onto the machine. And the hitch design is probably one of the most important elements of the hedge cutter. And in fairness to the contractors that they're using, they will know that, because when that arm reaches out, the way that weight transfers. So it's very important that it's fitted. Now, there is new designs. In fairness, yesterday we had RT hedge cutters from Kerry were demonstrating their machine, and they were talking about the patent design that they had on their hitch system. But again, they said, that design allows them to hitch the machine on much, much quicker. Some of the machines are actually bolted onto the chassis, but again, that's into the very big contractor machines, but it's the only safe way of transferring all that weight that's hanging out on one side safely onto the tractor. And again, to avoid, like Joran was saying, any of the accidents or incidents, making sure that it's properly fitted.
Liam, a couple for you. Do you know, is Clare County Council the only county with your scheme?
I don't know. What I can say is at least 4 to 5 local authorities have contacted me looking for the details of the scheme and how it operates. So it is something that I know has been considered by other local authorities at this point.
Excellent. So you've answered my next question as to how we could encourage others to do so. Talk to Claire. He's really, I mean, and promoting it today, I think, is very good. But a real one I know is an issue for all counties. Liam, we need a system to reward contractors to cut less, and I'd maybe add the word better there rather than more, as they are presently inclined to do when doing a neat shaving job for their clients, and as Francis says, they're doing that because they're giving what they perceive to be value for money. So how do we reward contractors to do the right job, Liam, which is,
Well, in terms of, I suppose, contractors that we take on directly when we're doing some strategic routes, we will give them clear direction to only, cut what needs to be cut and not to overcut. And as I suppose our biodiversity officer has met with all the relevant engineers within the municipal districts to encourage that. So they're the ones who are applying the contractors. So I suppose that message is getting through to the contractors.
Can I come in there, Liam? You've no problem still paying them if they leave a few dirty thumps, as I was calling them, in the hedge or the turns.
Absolutely not. I suppose while road safety is key, we want to, I suppose, maintain the structure of the hedgerow and ensure that it's, it is available for birds and so on. And I suppose we're very conscious of the biodiversity aspect.
very good. And I'll just come on to some of the hedgy ones. Any advice on ash dieback? And I think that ties in with the safety there. In general, dead wood is good. Dead standing wood is really good in hedges, but safety comes first. So if we're talking roadsides, obviously that's safety comes first. But in general, there is no evidence that I know of to suggest that leaving a dead ash tree is any disadvantage. And personally, I would rather let nature take its course and let the hedge take over, and the whitethorn and the blackthorn will come up in its place, provided it's given space and there's animals not walking through it. So that would be the one. And just the last one I think I wanted to talk about was the advice on how to rehabilitate a neglected and overgrown hedge. I have neglected my hedges and they are no longer stock-proof or human-proof trespassers. So the first point I would say there is, and we featured a lot last week about the tree line hedge that you could call neglected and not stock-proof and not human-proof. So if the first point is consider leaving it as a neglected tree line hedge, which is absolutely super for biodiversity. However, the second point I wanted to make, and we had a fantastic hedge laying demonstration yesterday with Owen Donnelly, and the comment when the group came around was, my God, that's human proof, was actually the word people used. And if that was around my house, which possibly this person who's asking the question is, I would suggest hedge laying done by the right person in the right way. We love hedge laying, we just worry about it being done wrong. But when you see what Owen Donnelly did yesterday, as I said, no human or animal would go through it. So consider talking to the hedge laying associations and finding them.
There's a question there about the course for contractors to be in a search. Again, look, Teagasc does offer that course. It's Pallaskenry College that have run that, now, but it's been a good number of years now, Catherine, since we've actually run it, because the numbers were just not there to of interest in it. But if there was enough interest there, absolutely, that course can be run again.
Just on that, Francis, there's a comment in here that said, "He who pays the piper calls the tune." So money sometimes makes things happen for us, right? Is there a requirement or maybe a need? Maybe we've spoke a lot about communication contractors and contractors having a lot of information on how to cut hedgerows. Should there be something there to support them to do courses, maybe, or encourage them to do courses to upskill them?
Possibly, Joe. Now again, it's going to come down to communication. Joe, to be honest, in my view, it's actually in a lot of cases it's the farmer, Joe, who maybe needs that bit of education, Joe. Because in fairness to the contractors, they're more than willing, Joe, to do whatever, Joe, the farmer wants, and their aim driving out the gate is that the farmer is happy, because he's the guy that's paying the bill. So again, it's as much, the farmer, and that's where that communication comes into it. In fairness to the contractors and the operators, they're in most cases, it's the same man that's on that machine every year. He's very, very skilled, very, very capable, and in doing his job, so, and more than capable of, in fairness, with these machines, with the reach and everything on them, able to lift the height of that hedge, no problem, again, I think there's maybe two sides to that.
Catherine, you want to come in there?
On that, Cathal? I think there's room for the FETAC, 2-day course, and then the assessment afterwards is very, very important for somebody who is tendering for work from a county council or from other state bodies, which that happens. But I think days like what Francis put on yesterday is absolutely incredible for, getting simple messages across. And, sometimes the one contractor, but then there's lots of people driving machines. So I think we need a lot more of publicity. And Marina Mulligan from Waterford County Council Biodiversity Officer was there yesterday. And I think the biodiversity network of the network of biodiversity officers, again, maybe more demonstrations, more visual. You have to see that clump in the hedge full of fruit and flowers, with birds perching on it to really get the message. And then, as Francis says, it's actually easy to do it. People, they're the experts who know what to do and the height and all that. But once you see it, you say, God, that's possible, I think. So demonstration.
Yeah, and you've been doing a lot of work on the catching over the last number of years. And are we seeing improvements across the country?
I think so, and I know my previous boss, Pat Murphy, always says he can see it in Wexford. Yeah, I suppose I always see the problems, Cathal. So I hope so, and I think we need an understanding of the general public as well. And I think that's where our messages are really important. That everybody sees, and as Francis says, it doesn't look, the contractor skipped a bit. We also want to get the message out that contractors are not baddies. They when I talk to them, they talk about so many negative reactions when they're seen cutting a hedge at all. So we really need, but that's why we need the whole farm strategy, like the picture behind me with, everything provided there in different ways in different hedges, but half the hedges left as tree line hedges, freely fruiting and flowering, and every topped hedge as high and as wide as possible with the clump of thorns.
Yeah. Liam, or Kieran, actually, something occurred to me when you were talking, and we're talking about accidents, things that happened. Do you see an increase in claims strictly related to kind of hedge cutting accidents and injuries at this time of year, or do you kind of track that kind of information?
Yeah, we probably wouldn't have something that granular specifically just back to hedge cutting. We do see sort of a trend, I suppose, in relation to agricultural contracting and machineries and tractors. Obviously, in a busier time of the year, you'd expect to have more incidents, but it's not something that we've been tracking. So I can't really give you a clear answer on it. But there was one thing that Catherine was speaking about there a minute ago I'd like to come back in, which was about the ash dieback. So I think it's really important when we look at the tree to do an assessment of the tree and see what risk it does pose. It poses a very different risk, obviously, on the land than what it does on a roadway. If it's at risk, then that's when we have to go about managing that tree and potentially taking it down. And it's really important. This isn't just like taking down an ordinary tree. Potentially, there's rot in the middle of this tree and you go to take it down and it'll fall completely different. So it's really important that you have a competent tree feller, someone who's trained in that type of operation to take it down. In some cases, it could be a run of trees along a roadway. You may need to talk to your local county council, possibly about closing the road for that work to be carried out. It just depends on how big the issues happen to be. But I think the important message I want to give out, if you're felling a tree, you need to be trained and competent in felling of trees.
Yeah. And Liam, just going back to your project, or your number of years operational now, how you have standards, you've set rules in place. How are you ensuring that maybe someone doesn't go a bit astray and starts doing things that we don't want them to do? Does your biodiversity officer come in there, or how do you regulate that?
No, well, I suppose when an application comes in and works are completed, the applicant then tries to draw down the grant. So our municipal district office will go out and inspect the works. And if it's overcutting takes place, we won't pay the grant. And that's, I suppose, stated clearly in the application form and in the offer letter that they get from ourselves awarding the grant.
Yeah. That's fair enough. And Francis, a quick one back for you again. We were talking about, I think, blades, the beads and the birds and the bees don't really mind what blade we use, but maybe catch them between yourself and Francis. Do we need kind of certain blades or sharpening blades or mulching hedges? Like I'm sure it probably affects the regrowth of the hedgerows in some way.
Well, I'll just start by saying I want a clean cut. Damaged, smashed branches are just inviting disease in, and you won't notice it immediately, but long term. So I want clean cuts. Francis will tell us how to get them.
Yeah, no, in fairness, it's one of the things that we discussed yesterday. Again, Bamford had a lovely display with a huge range of different types of blades, So, but again, they're kind of down to maybe two types of blades that would be most common. Now, they're looking for a blade that will give a clean cut, now, look, they're saying, even up to maybe 2 inches, of material. But again, that would involve, a very sharp blade, a new blade, So again, just for contractors, and anybody operating the machine to make sure the blades are in good condition, if they are changing blades, again, just the balance of the machine, again, would need to be dealt with. They do have blades then that will work with, say, that type of blade. Catherine was wondering whether we could cut grass verges and things like that. So again, those blades tend to struggle a bit with the grass, So again, they're fine for doing the light trimming, but the grass tends to get wrapped around them, So there's a different type of blade for that. So unfortunately, of all the things on the hedge cutter, the blades, there's a huge variety. So I definitely talk to the particular manufacturer, to see what blades they have on offer for your machine, to get the right choice. But in most cases, you're down to 1 or 2 blades would be the common blades that you'd be using. Just make sure they're sharp.
Yeah, and there's just a point made there just about the importance if you are getting tree surgeons in to make sure they're insured and legitimate. So that's a good one for farmers. Catherine, we're kind of coming near the end, so maybe we'll finish up with you if you have any words of wisdom. You're near the end of hedgerow week as well. Very successful again this year, and we've seen a lot of good work this morning, and hopefully that we'll see that rolling out across the landscape over the next number of years. So any final words of wisdom for our landowners? And
well, just the 2 key changes we'd love to see is one, that farmers would choose hedges, at least half their hedges, to let them escape into flower freely, flower and fruit. And number 2 then, which is the immediate one for the contractors and the hedge cutting this autumn, is to leave a clump in every topped hedge. We would transform the countryside if, as we drove around, we say no topped hedge should be there without a clump of whitethorn, which will provide the flowers and fruit.
Yeah, that's super. I think that's a great way to finish, and some really good advice this morning. And I think the questions are testament to the really good work that you're doing, and really good informative questions. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but I just want to say a big thank you to Catherine, Francis, Kieran and Liam this morning, and everybody that was involved in the videos as well. They were excellent. Just want to say a big thank you to Yvonne Marr, who's working away in the background there, running the show. Yvonne has some other obligations she's going towards in Teagasc there shortly, so she won't be joining us as much on the Friday mornings anymore. But I just want to thank her for her contributions. She's been with the Signpost Series since the get-go, and she's run the show more or less from the start. So big thank you to Yvonne. And if everything blows up next week, it's because Yvonne is not here, so you can blame us. Also, just another thing we want to let you know about, a big congratulations to our colleague, Professor Pat Dillon, Teagasc Director of Research, receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Agricultural Science Association conference last night. So that's great to see Pat. Next week, we're going to focus on the native Irish honeybee with Professor Grace McCormick at University of Galway, and that's not to be missed. So do tune in again next Friday at 9:30, and slán go fóill.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review and subscribe to the Signpost Series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.